Scatter brushes in Illustrator. So sometimes brushes can be the best option for creating an illustration. So I want to show you specifically the scatter brushes here. So let's look at the scatter brush options dialog box. What I have here are two objects, two things that have multiple shapes on them. So I have a snowflake and I have an ant. Let's define them, and let's actually first define them as scatter brushes, and then let's compare that to an art brush. So if I open up my brushes, and remember, if you can't find that, go under Window and locate brushes right there. And while this is open, I can do a new. If I have my object selected, I can do a new. Let's do that. And it'll ask me what type of a brush I would like. Let's do a scatter brush. Click OK. And because it was selected, it knew exactly what I wanted to create the scatter brush. Now I can choose my settings at this point, and I can always go back and change them. So I don't have to absolutely set this in stone at this time. So if I want to just leave it all at the default and click OK, you'll see that now I have a scatter brush. Now the other way I can define a new brush is by selecting the artwork and dragging it into the panels, the brushes panel, and it'll ask me, and it grays out the ones it knows it cannot be. It cannot be a calligraphic brush, and it cannot be a bristle brush. So let's choose a scatter brush here as well. Click OK. And again, I'm going to leave it at the default for this initial test. So now, with those being defined, I can drag these and put them in my scratch area. Let's just collapse this down, move them over. So I'm using my marquee tool to select, move them over. So now I don't have to worry about them on my artboard. Let's open this back up so we can see. And remember that a brush can be applied to a stroke. So I can do this in a number of ways. If I wanted to, I could use my paintbrush tool. Let's click the snowflake, and I can paint. Now what I'm doing is I'm actually drawing a path, but this brush has a stroke applied to it. That is the snowflake. The other way I could do it, let's just Control Z to undo that, is actually click and drag an object. So I'll use a circular shape here. And I can apply to my stroke. Let's go to the stroke option. Now I could put a black stroke on this, or if I go to my brushes, I can put one of my brush strokes on it. And that works with all of these. You know, I can do any of these strokes that I have in here. I'm sorry, any of these brushes that I have in here. Okay, so now if I want to go back to my scatter brush options and do some editing, I'm just going to double click on that brush in the brush panel, and here I then will be able to change. Here's my size. My size, of course, does the size. So if it's fixed, it's going to stay in this specific percentage. And I want to make sure my preview is on so I can get a little glimpse of this. I'll slide this up towards the top so we can see some. If I do random here, and I then can have a range. So I could have my ants be from 50%, and I can type in here. You can see how much they have decreased in size. 50 to 100. And if I look up here, you can see there's a couple big ones, right? So it's randomized. Spacing, do the same thing. I can either have a smaller spacing, and if I decrease this, you can see how they get very, very close. Or I could again have a range if I do a random amount. Let's do really, really small. Scattering, again, fixed or random. And remember, these remaining options here are when you're working with a tablet, where you can have a few more options here. Let's scatter these a little bit, and you see what's happening in this option. It scatters it away a certain amount. And again, if I randomize it, I have ins and outs of an amount here. You can see that they're moving all around now. And rotation. We don't want all my ants marching in the same direction. Some of them might be looking the other way. So I can rotate them an amount, and the more I do this, you can see the more crazy they're going in all different directions. So if I click OK, again, it says, do you want me to apply these changes to the existing brush stroke? So by doing this, I'm changing not only what I'm working on right now, but if other brush strokes have been applied to other objects. So I'll just go ahead and apply it. And there I go. So you can see how it's a circle. That's what I have, is a circle. But I can use this to create artwork really quickly. So if I want my ants to ruin my picnic, I don't have to draw each individual ant or draw an ant, copy paste and scale, rotate. I can utilize my brushes to create a scene full of ants.